1. This occurred only last week, while I was camping up in a more remote part of a town called Julian, about an hour and a half away from the city of San Diego. We had left our house on Tuesday, and planned to stay all the way to Saturday. Now for some background on the campground. The place is usually quite empty, with trees and bushes everywhere. The air is clean and sweet, and the sky is always blue but never too hot. I had never had a paranormal experience here, despite friends of mine who came and said that the place felt off. There are two parts of the campground: the cabins and the tent sites. We stayed in a cabin, one that was far away from everything else, including the bathroom. I'll explain why that is important later on. The cabin seemed nice, only big enough for 2 bunk beds, a table, and an electric heater that looks like a real fireplace. No bathroom in the cabin, however. So naturally, being my 15-year-old self who loves to make things harder on myself, sarcasm intended, I took the top left bunk, the one with the rickety ladder and frame. I climbed up, blew up my air mattress, and started to unroll my sleeping bag, when I realized there was dried blood in between my bed and the wall. I immediately screamed and asked my mom and sister to come take a look. They asked what I was screaming at. I replied, "Don't you see the blood?" They told me they couldn't, and promptly told me to get some sleep. So I dozed off for an hour or two, still thoroughly creeped out. As I was sleeping, I had a dream about a man lying in the same bed as me, being stabbed to death. I woke up with a scream and sweat pouring down my face. I convinced myself that it was just my imagination playing games with me. By this time it was about 8 p.m, and my mom wanted me to make a fire for everyone. We had s'mores and everything was just fine. Fast forward to Thursday. It is 2:59 a.m, and I wake up with a start for absolutely no reason. No sound at all. Checking my phone, I discover that I have woken up right before the devil's hour. Suddenly, I have to pee really bad. I get up, put on my heaviest jacket, grab my pocket knife, and head out on the track for the bathroom. The bathroom is pretty far away. I would say about a half a mile. Here I am, walking under the light of the moon. No wind, no sound, nothing. I get to the bathroom, walk inside, and there I see a man dressed all in black. I walk to the urinal next to him, and he vanishes into thin air. At this point, I am creeped out and ready to head back to the cabin. On the walk back, about halfway through, I start to feel like I am being watched, like really stared at. I turn around to check behind me, and as I turn my head back to look where I am walking, the man appears out of seemingly nowhere. This time his face is chalk white, and he has blood stains all over his shirt. When I shine my flashlight on him, the parts of him that touch the light go away. It's odd. I couldn't see much around me, but even with my light off, I could see him clear as day. At this point, I was scared shitless, and I wanted to run, but for some reason, I couldn't make myself move. I started to see faint white silhouettes appear around me in a circle, all chanting some sort of song in what I thought to be an otherworldly tongue. I don't know how long this lasted, but I was eventually able to move, and when I did, every one of the demons went away. When I got back to the cabin, I quickly burnt some incense and woke up my mom to tell her what happened. She told me that she was having a dream of a woman dressed in black being stabbed to death. I woke her up in the middle of it. She told me that we would leave in the morning, and so we did. I'm wondering if anyone has had a similar experience. The dream consists of me myself sleeping. Then a man dressed in black and chalk white skin walks into the cabin with some sort of black knife. He then walks over to the top right bunk, and that's when I see the man. The man, though I couldn't make out what he was dressed in, looked scared in his sleep, but never woke up as he was being stabbed. The man in black then turns and looks at me. He starts walking towards me, but that is when I wake up. Please let me know if you have had any similar experiences. Contact me through email at captainarcher35@gmail.com. Thanks for listening. 2. About 5 or 6 years ago, me and my friend had been at a birthday party of another friend. We had some moonshine, or he did. I barely drank before we found out that we had to walk home. This was at the other side of the town we live in. So we had this very long walk. Clock was about 3 a.m. when we got to the school I went to. And after the school, there's this long road thing for people who walk or ski. It's located on a mountain, not mountain, kind of a hill, but very long, and there's a forest and all. Sorry, don't know how to properly describe it. It takes about 40 minutes to walk through it. Before we enter the forest, we smell this awful, disgusting smell, and we both were like, "What the fuck, dude, did you fart?" We were 15, but it did not smell like a fart. We just continued walking. This is winter in northern Norway, so it's really dark, and the trail we walked on was very dark. But there were some light lamps along the trail. To the sides it's just trees and you can barely see the fjord. We walk but don't talk. We were very tired and had walked for over 1 hour. But something took my attention. There was a really creepy whispering noise, like a lot of people around, like I couldn't tell what they said, but you could hear the vocal focus on the vowels. I first thought that it was the wind, but this was constant, it didn't stop, and the atmosphere was insanely eerie and sinister. I tried to ignore it because I thought it was just my imagination. The more we walk, the louder and harder and violent the whispers get. We just walk, 2 boys in the woods, surrounded by Dolby surround sound whispers from hell. When we get to the halfway point, there's this bench with a nice view over the fjord. But this night, nothing was nice. As we got there, we hear a woman scream in the forest in the direction we were supposed to go. After all this mental torture by the constant whispering, I just break, I freak out, I panic. I get a breakdown and start saying, "What the hell is going on? And do you hear the whispering?" Want to know what he replied? He said, "No, I don't hear anything." We continue to walk, and the whispers are everywhere still. I was sure I was going batshit crazy. When we get to the end of the forest, there's this long hill down, very steep. We get forced to run cause of it, while trying not to fall in the snow. We run down and stop in the middle of the hill, and we catch our breaths. We aren't and weren't very sporty, so we're just standing there catching our breaths when I look at the top of the hill. I get shivers from writing this, but there was a woman in a white dress with black hair standing there, watching down on us. My blood froze completely. She just stared at us, before she just turned to her left and took 3 steps and vanished. I have never ran so hard in my life, so far. I have never been that afraid before. While walking back, he told me he heard the whispers all along, and that you're not supposed to speak about it when you are in haunted areas, or something like that. We also talked about how the whispers sounded Russian, but they didn't sound like a man or a woman, and they were around us, not just coming from a single direction. Fun fact, there's a graveyard next to this forest road thing, and there's a big memorial stone because of Russians who died there in the Second World War. Fun fact too, when I was in 6th grade, we had a teacher who said he once went skiing there at around midnight, when he saw a man in a big fur coat walking in boots there, when there was a lot of snow. In the end he thought, I'll outrun him, and this teacher is very athletic, and skiing is way faster than walking in 50 centimeter snow. He gave his all to try to outrun him, but next time he turned, the man was closer. Never believed him until after that. I know it's a big cliche that there is a woman in white, but honestly, that's what I saw. And I recently told this story to a friend, and he said that the smell might be sulfur, which would mean I met demonic shit. When I realized I got this feeling of terror, even though it's 5+ years ago. Hope you enjoyed it. I did not. 3. Hello, I'm a teenage girl from Scotland. I have lived in the same apartment with my parents and my older brother for half my life, and I fully believe that it is haunted. I am not bothered by this, nor am I scared, but I felt as though my stories may be interesting to one or two of you on here. I live in an apartment building which consists of 6 fairly large apartments, 2 on each floor. Only 3 are inhabited, however. My apartment is haunted too, but I'm going to be talking about the apartment on the bottom floor, on the opposite side of the building. The apartment, since I moved in roughly 9 years ago, has been nothing but a black mess of charcoal remains. I heard from one of the neighbors that there was a bad house fire inside the apartment a few years before I moved in, and it had just never been refurbished for whatever good reason. Probably because the council didn't care enough to spend money on it. Anyway, apparently the husband, wife, and their child were cooked alive in the apartment. I have absolutely no clue whether all of that is 100% true. But going based off the look of the apartment's interior and what I'm about to tell you, I'd assume it is. Basically, one day just after my birthday, I was having a sleepover with a few of my friends. We were young and it was the end of June, meaning the weather was scorching hot, so we played outside for hours on end. At one point, I turned to face the middle window of the apartment. I was standing directly across from it, and that is the first time I believe I saw the husband. As I looked over to the window, what was left of the burnt, sad curtains had been pulled up from a corner, a dark figure staring back at me. As soon as it noticed that I could see it, it jumped away, the curtain falling back into place. The figure wasn't solid. To me, it was like a cloudy, dark mass. But I could still make out that it was a tall man with broad shoulders and a slim face. At first I thought nothing of this. I was young and had a very active imagination. Still do. And so it just brushed over my head. I really didn't bother to think about it. At some point or another, we all managed to find our way round to the other side of the building, the front. On this side of the apartment there were no curtains, and because the windows on each apartment are fairly huge, you can basically see right through the entire apartment. After staying round at the front side of the building, I noticed one of the dangling lights was swinging pretty violently. I wouldn't have questioned this normally, but after what had just happened and coming to realize that there is no way for wind to get into that apartment, I kind of came to the conclusion that something was wrong. After another little while, we returned to the back side of the building, again just playing games and minding our own innocent business. I looked back at that middle window to see that one of the curtains was now half opened. I remember seeing that same figure run out of the space where the door would be, to appear in the next room, the living room, to stare at me. We stared at each other for a solid half a minute, before I peeled my eyes from the view to look back at my friends. When I looked back, he was gone. After this, nothing extreme happened that night, and not really ever again. But sometimes I do still see that same shadowy figure staring at me when I enter or leave the apartment building. 4. I have a few jobs, and one of them is a photo restoration artist for a relatively small business. It's great. I'm also a photographer and have a special appreciation for preserving memories, so it's an extra special gig. We don't just restore antique photos. Our projects really range from the old-ass daguerreotypes to present photographs that are faded, have water damage, moldy, stuck to glass, etc. So anyways, one morning I open up my project and start going to town on fixing this photo. It's of a young man in his mid-20s or so, and besides the fact that he isn't smiling, and it sort of reminds me of a mugshot, it's pretty typical. Nonetheless, the image of Mr. H gave me the creeps right away. The more I kept working on the image, the more I started to feel really panicked. Something wasn't right. Now, I'm no stranger to anxiety, so before jumping to the conclusion that it must have something to do with the image, I tried to tell myself I had too much caffeine, or my general anxiety was acting up. At the time, I was still pretty new at the office, and didn't feel comfortable telling my office mate that I thought a photo was haunting me. So I'm working on the photo, and feeling more and more sick when I start seeing the word suicide in white, bold letters against a black BG flash in my head. At this point, I'm thinking, I might either be losing it or communicating with a photo. I'm feeling more and more anxious when suddenly my office mate's computer crashes out of nowhere. In all my time there, I've only seen the computers crash if the power goes out. Creepy, but okay. I ask him if he knew anything about my current project. He doesn't. His computer crashes again, but this time all his computer icons are rearranged. Looking back, I wish I would have studied them to see if they spelled out anything. By around noon, the owner of the business comes by to check in on us. And since he's really the only one who talks in depth with our clients, I ask him if he remembers the background of the image. He talks to tons of people every day, so particular clients don't always stand out. But he immediately answered solemnly that the family of Mr. H was extremely distraught when they sent us this photo. I guess it had been the only picture of him they had, and Mr. H had indeed committed suicide. So by now I'm convinced Mr. H is near me, and am working quickly to finish his image up, so I don't have to look at him anymore. Usually I pay careful attention not to rush, but at this point I'm feeling ill, lightheaded, and anxiously angry. As soon as I finish the job, I feel a bit of relief, but still feel a presence even after I leave the office. From here, nothing too crazy happens. I contacted a friend who I consider a spiritual guru, if you will, and we pray for Mr. H to find his peace. I felt a huge sense of relief, so hopefully that means he did too. Anyways, it was such a bizarre experience, and I haven't had a similar encounter yet in over 1,500 other photographs. 5. True story. I used to live in this small 150 years old hospital that turned into a house. My mom told before that when I was little, I always played alone. When my mom asked me if I had any friends, I answered yes, her name is Ada. Days before my birthday, my mom asked me to invite Ada, and I was very excited. I turned to my left and said, "Did you hear that, Ada? Mom said you're invited to my party." My mom got scared at first, but she thought it was just an imaginary friend, so she went with it. By the way, I have no memory about this Ada. I started talking to my parents about Ada since my birthday party. According to myself, Ada is a small girl, innocent-looking, soft voice, quite shy, long black hair, and pretty too. She had pale skin and reddish plump lips. She had tuberculosis when she was a kid. Her dad is a doctor, and her mom is a businesswoman. When I mentioned to them that Ada's hands were always cold, they started to get worried. They had investigated about the origin of the house. They found out that it used to be a hospital more than a century ago. There was a kid who died in the hospital because of tuberculosis. Her father happens to be a doctor in the town. Disappointed in himself for not being able to save his daughter, he committed suicide. His wife killed herself weeks after. The name of the girl was Ada. My parents panicked and didn't know what to do. They consulted experts on how they can make Ada leave me alone for good. They followed the instructions, and within days, Ada finally stopped hanging out with me. For days I cried and cried, calling out to Ada. I told my parents it's your fault why she left. She was crying that night, and she told me that you wanted her to leave, and now she's gone. And then one day, Ada came back. I didn't tell my parents that she came back, but they were smart enough to figure it out. My parents talked to me, saying that I'm keeping Ada from being with her parents. They told me that she has to leave because she's happier with her parents. Later that day, I told my parents that Ada left, and she thanked me for letting her go, and for being her friend, and that she had so much fun hanging out with me. That is a long story, isn't it? I hope you read it all. I was freaking out when my parents told me this story. I had no freaking idea this happened to me, and I have absolutely no memory of this. Also, my mom told me that the experts they consulted said that ghosts look solid and not transparent like we see in movies. That explains a lot, since I wasn't able to see her as a ghost, but as a living person. Most people have probably seen ghosts before, but because they are solid, we cannot differentiate them from living people. They also said that kids have a better ability to see ghosts than adults do. Although Ada sounds harmless, I thought it would be best not to involve ourselves with spirits. This involves using spirit boards, going to haunted houses, etc. If you do these kinds of things just for fun, it is considered disrespectful to spirits. You'll risk disturbing them and making them angry, and then you'll know they have followed you home. Spirits are like people. There are good ones and bad ones. I'm just lucky enough that I encountered a good one. If not, I can't even imagine what would have happened to me and my family. There are also demons who impersonate dead people to tell you lies or manipulate you into doing things. We shouldn't make friends with them, or even talk to them, because then they would have a reason to stay. Unless you want them to stay, that is. Hey everyone, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to 5 True Paranormal Stories, episode 45. Thanks very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. Okay, coming up on Saturday, we're going to have some TIFUs. That's all picked and sorted out, so I just need to record that in a day or two. Sorry if I'm speaking more gently right now. My throat's a bit rough after the recording session there, so I'm just being gentle and I'm going to rest after this video. And I haven't decided on what I want to do on Sunday yet. I will have something up. Well, obviously I'll have something up. But I think if I can't get together something different that I haven't done before, I'll try for more either bad roommates, bad dates, or neck beards, because I've got a few stories of each. I think for one of them I've actually got just about, if not everything I need to do another video anyway. So it shouldn't be too difficult to get one of those together. But yeah, I'll try for something new. I'm really enjoying having something fresh on a Sunday, so we'll see what I can come up with. Okay, and with that I'm going to head off for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.